The Channel Islands sit here just off the coast of France, and notably, they belong to the United Kingdom. They were a part of the Duchy of Normandy, which England notably lost to France in the early 13th century, but the islands have remained English and later British thereafter, which raises the question, how? How did the British keep hold of the Channel Islands for so long, despite them being so close to France? To begin, since the 10th century, the Channel Islands were considered to be a part of the Duchy of Normandy, at that point under the control of Duke Rollo, a Viking who had basically turned up there and blackmailed the King of France into giving him the region. Later, his descendant, William, conquered England and ruled both as separate entities, and this led to England and France's ruling dynasties being tied to each other, with the kings of France demanding that the kings of England, who were also the Dukes of Normandy, submit to them. Unsurprisingly, the English kings said no, and so, centuries of war. In 1204, King John the Only infamously lost all of his territories in northern France, thereby leaving the Channel Islands as the only parts of Normandy still under English rule. And 800 years later, these islands still don't belong to France, so why? Well, it wasn't for a lack of trying. John's successor, Henry III, continued to war against France without much success. And so, in 1259, in return for him renouncing his claim to Normandy, the French King Louis IX would renounce his claim to the Channel Islands, and would also recognise the English king as the Duke of Aquitaine. After this, peace obviously reigned forever. And by forever, I mean roughly 80 years later, it was time for the 100 Years' War. During this and the following Wars of the Roses, the islands were taken by the French and retaken by the English numerous times. Pope Sixtus IV, because he couldn't stand the French king, issued a decree which made the islands permanently neutral, something which was promptly ignored when the French decided to come for the island a year later. After this failed, both kingdoms agreed to the island's neutrality, and this lasted until the late 17th century when William III rescinded it, because he had a war to fight against the French, and the Channel Islands were great for raiding the French coast. After this, not much changed until the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon briefly threatened the ownership of the islands. However, British naval supremacy meant that the French Navy wasn't able to protect the landing, and also Napoleon had much bigger problems. And after the war, France's interest in retaking the islands was minimal. The new French monarchy and later republics wanted to keep Britain on side to act as a potential ally against a rising Prussia, and so a few islands weren't exactly worth it. Furthermore, in 1801, the British monarchy had forever renounced its claim to the French throne, and thus they declared the Channel Islands to not be a part of Normandy but a separate entity under the British Crown. And given that the Napoleonic Wars were the last one in which Britain and France ever fought against each other, there were no more opportunities for France to take